I would like to present Mr. Dale Arnold with the Ohio Farm Bureau of Federation. Please come to the podium, please, and state your first and last name for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Dale, D-A-L-E, Arnold, A-R-N-O-L-D. I'm Director of Energy, Utility, and Local Government Policy with the Ohio Farm Bureau. Would you like me to start my proceeding?
Please, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
Let's just say this is the start of a conversation. Besides working with the Ohio Farm Bureau, I've been in this position, the Farm Bureau, for 40 years, 36 in the position I'm at right now. When you talk about energy development, when our members and local governments have problems, issues, concerns, or questions on anything energy related, which could be oil and gas, it could be pipelines, transmission lines, on-site generation, utility scale, community scale, wind, solar, biomass, fuel cell, utility bills and procedures, tariffs, working with the Power Siting Board, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I am that person basically that does that. In my experience, I've been involved in over 110 power siting cases with the Ohio Power Siting Board with regard to wind, solar, biomass, and fuel cell. I've advocated for our members in front of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and continue to work with local governments very much on a very regular basis, including 3 conferences today with their counterparts in other counties. Also, I serve with Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. For the last 15 years, I've been involved with local governments as a member of the Energy and Air Quality Working Group. I'm a retired chairman and current vice chairman of that particular working group, and have also been assigned to the task force to help member local governments, of which Etna Township is one, to gather resources, information, materials as you are making decisions upon your constituents or for your constituents when it comes to solar development. A number of things are happening. Wow. To give you some idea from the handout, it's almost like you can't tell the players without a scorecard because a number of things are happening. If you'll take a look at this, quote, scorecard, it's interesting because there are 3 distinct types of solar development. The largest is utility scale. Utility scale solar development are projects 50 megawatts or larger, and they come under the jurisdiction of the Ohio Power Siting Board. That's the part of the Public Utilities Commission since 1965 has had authority with regard to power siting and also transmission lines and pipelines of sizes and different kilovolt capacities. With regard to that, that is a adjudicatorial or a judicial process. I tell people that's very much like a court of law. It is administered by administrative law judges. You do have the power of a judge here in the state of Ohio in these proceedings. There are a number of opportunities for local governments, such as township trustees, to practice their right of intervention into those, working with their county prosecutors or legal counsel. Also being involved in a number of proceedings to represent and advocate for their constituents. Again, at that time, since it is a judicial process, also rules of evidence also apply with regard to that. And that covers all types of power generation, 50 megawatts or above, except for solar, which starts at 5 megawatts or above, they are deemed economically beneficial projects, and because of the size and the scope of the equipment and different things, it started at 5 megawatts. That's the only exception. That's utility scale. There are 60 different utility scale solar projects under development in the state of Ohio and been for the last 5 to 6 years. That involves basically a number of permits with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission on interconnection into a transmission system and in a transmission circuit. Also, through the process, there are 5 of those that are operational. There's another 3 that are currently under construction. Many of them have been permitted. There's about 10 left, and 3 basically are in pre-filing status. The closest ones here are just a few minutes away, basically with Union Ridge and with Harvey and 58 other projects throughout the state of Ohio. I work a lot with regard to those and folks, helping them address issues, advocate their positions in front of the Power Siting Board. Those things happen there. On the other side of the spectrum, let's talk about the small stuff. We call that on-site. And for over 25 years, a number of residents, farm, small business, mercantile businesses had the opportunity to invest in on-site generation of many different types of technologies to help control their on-site energy costs. On-site solar basically has been used quite a bit over the last 15 to 20 years. I've worked through Morpsey to do a tremendous amount of training for folks there, as well as your counterparts in what we call UCLA, Upper Canton, Lower Akron, where this is very
I didn't know that, wow.
Consequently, when you're talking about that, those are projects that are anywhere between a kilowatt level rooftop solar to 4.9 megawatts, which could be basically for a warehouse or a factory. Again, single point of interconnection, single customer, single account, and single agreement. That agreement, basically, the governance for that comes from the incumbent utility, which could be American Electric Power, which could be a rural electric cooperative, which could be a municipal electric company. There is an agreement between that particular user and that company. The company has a number of detailed tariffs, a number of detailed steps in that contract. That contract is also brought before the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio for its acceptance and use. So governance basically is there, safety, convenience, interconnection with regard to those. And so that's how those systems are governed, is through that interconnection agreement. Can county, and especially township and local government, be involved in that process? And the answer is yes. You have the right with regard to zoning to do a number of things with regard to aesthetics, placement, setbacks, those particular types of things that are going in. As we said before, if you have basically a large solar array, where do people like to put it? Usually down in the corner where they don't have to see it. But what happens if you have a neighbor across the way who has to take a look at that? Those setbacks and things are part of local zoning, inspection and different things regarding that through your local building inspectors and things can be done. Decommissioning, if one becomes derelict or whatever, you have the right basically to have it removed. A number of provisions which complement that interconnection agreement are part of your process with zoning, and I help a lot of folks basically do that. So we've talked about the big and the small. Let's talk about the stuff in the middle. Starting 2 years ago, you had what was called House Bill 450, which was in front of the Ohio General Assembly in the last session. And those were to establish what were called community scale solar projects. They were between 5 and 49.9 megawatts in capacity. If basically established, and it can be established in urban, suburban, and rural areas, if and when they were established, they would be operational, and they would also be able to solicit or also be able to enroll customers in that utility service area, which could be home, farm, business, mercantile, customer, industrial, to take benefit or take generation or share generation assets with regard to that through their utility bill. That concept is being taken a look at. House Bill 450 had several different hearings in front of the House Utility Committee at that particular time, but no final version of the bill came across with regard to that. And so it died during the last General Assembly. However, also during the last General Assembly, you had House Bill, one moment here, I've got numbers going all through my head. I want to make sure you have the correct one. House Bill 501, because the question became power siting. Who has governance with regard to those? As you know, the large stuff is the Ohio Power Siting Board, 50 megawatts or above. This is between 5 and 49.9 megawatts. And consequently, you literally have no rule, regulation, law, process, procedures, governance, safety, setback. A number of things you need to think about with regard to power siting is absent. House Bill 501 was a technical corrections bill on local government. It was passed during the lame duck session of the last General Assembly in December. And literally it conferred upon counties, and township zoning appeals boards the ability basically to do power siting, which basically said this, and the law is being interpreted, if a project is 50 megawatts or above, it goes to the Ohio Power Siting Board of that process. If it's between 5 and 49.9 megawatts, it goes to local jurisdiction. Also, the question with regard to that, it confers power on those who have zoning authority, which means you have to have zoning authority first before you can practice power siting for those particular types of projects. What's interesting, people were asking, we have a number of concerns. Over the last 3 years, I've worked with Farm Bureau members and local governments from as far south and west as Hamilton County, and as far north and east as Conneaut, Ohio on Lake Erie. Over 60 different counties have had land agents coming to them and talking about, we want to do a project here. It's going to be in your township. The substation is right here. You need to approve this project now. And the question becomes, no rule, regulation, law, process, authority. What's going on here? We've heard about House Bill 450. We're hearing a lot about House Bill 197, but there's no law, rule, regulation process in place. Also, for a number of residents, I work with a number of Farm Bureau members, also in those counties, who have been seen by anyone between 1, 3, and in some cases, 15 different land agents coming to their door with a lease agreement saying, we want to do a project, we want to establish it on your ground, and we want you to sign this now because we want to start doing this project in the spring. Again, no rule, regulation, law, process, governance, power siting, anything in place that govern this middle type of development. That's where the conundrum is. That's where the issues are. That's where the concerns are. It's interesting. I've been working in those 60 counties with local governments, with township trustees. And it's interesting when you talk about zoning. If you have zoning here, consider yourselves lucky because you have the basic foundation to adopt a number of things that govern this type of development, which is absolutely huge.
Right.
There's over 550 townships throughout Ohio have no zoning whatsoever. And the vast majority of counties in rural areas either have no zoning or their zoning is 2 pages long and do not attempt to address this type of an issue. I know you're working closely with Heidi Fout with the Ohio Townships Association. Please tell her I said hello. I work very closely with her. I know you have a guidance document through them, which is a skeleton. A lot of people have been asking me, we're looking for the meat on the bones, Mr. Arnold. Can you help us with that? Can you give us something we can read? Can you give us some examples? Can you give us some things with regard to the complexities on power siting we need to take a look at? I sometimes say God has a sense of humor, because you will see on this Thursday with the Power Siting Board, they've had these rules for a long time, and every 5 years through JCAR review, they're updated. On their agenda is the JCAR review for these types of rules. I can send you basically a hot link to that docket card, and that is interesting. There's a very nice document in that docket card that you can download. It is a matter of public record. You can read it. It's easy to understand, and it gives you some idea of the information, materials, and considerations you might want to think about as you're working with your other community stakeholders to create governance documents for this type of development. It's interesting, we have members on both sides of this particular issue, and that is our leadership position. And what I'm saying is this: a number of townships are being faced with regard to this type of governance. You have the right and the ability basically to say, if you want to come to our township, here's the things you need to do beyond FERC, NERC, and PJM to be accommodated in our area. Also, we have the right to go through this process and say, you know, we've discussed this, we've taken a look at it, and we need to say no thank you. I'm leaving that decision up to you and your communities. I'm just showing you where you can get information, materials, and also assist you in finding those things through both Farm Bureau as well as Mid-Ohio Regional Planning. If you take a look across the next sheet, these are things to take a look at. Companies will tell you, you really don't need to worry about our project because we're using the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission or FERC guidelines, the North American Electric Reliability Council guidelines with regard to technical capability, and PJM interconnection on the interconnection. FERC, NERC, and PJM. All power generation facilities have to use those. They're non-negotiable. You either do it or you don't have a project. When you come to power siting that you're being faced with, it's everything else or all the above. I want you to think about this. If this is a power generation facility, it could be wind, it could be solar, it could be compact nuclear, it could be natural gas fired turbine generation between 4 and 49.9 megawatts. It could come under your jurisdiction. You're placing that there in a farm field. Questions arise as you're doing construction, subsurface field tile and farm drainage, soil and water conservation, setbacks, noise control, electromagnetic interference, road use maintenance agreements with the township and the county engineer with regard to that. Decommissioning, when this thing basically is done, are you going to take your equipment and materials and go home? How is that going to be done? What kind of remediation you're going to do, performance bonding. There's about 75 to 80 other different things beyond FERC, NERC, and PGM that are part of this type of power siting. I know I'm very close to my time limit here. I do want to have some time for questions, but I say this is the start of the conversation. If you would like me to work with your zoning appeals board, if you would like also to host a number of meetings with your community constituents, please contact the County Farm Bureau. I'd be more than happy to do that. That's my job, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the trustees, are there any questions?
I have a couple. We
Yes.
spoke for about an hour a couple
Yes.
weeks ago on these topics, so I don't want to kind of reiterate a lot of stuff. But one of the concerns was if we don't have anything in place, we can't control anything. So
Yeah.
we either, if we want to allow it or disallow it, or some variation of that, we need to be proactive and put it in writing, correct?
That is correct. House Bill 501 confers that authority upon you. You do have to have zoning established first. You know, basically from history, that is a community process, that's a grassroots approach. To do the things you need to do to update your zoning will probably take approximately 36 months. And for folks who do not have zoning in townships or local government, it's going to be 48 to 60 months. By that time, it's going to be too late. I'm already working with a number of your constituents, a number of folks, a number of your counterparts in a number of counties and townships that have no zoning, and they're going, what do we do? Because we don't even have the ability to do that. Mr. Evans, you bring a very valid point. Being able to take a look at, discuss, creating those standards to accept a project, also creating those standards where you're saying no to a project, all need to be done through the zoning process.
And that's,
Go
sorry,
ahead. No.
that's for the middle size?
That's
on
correct.
On your scorecard, that's for
Yes.
the under 50? Okay.
Yes. Remember also this, when it comes to the large utility scale, a lot of people are saying this, we have SB 52 provisions, we don't need to worry about it. SB 52 was passed 3 years ago. It does give local government through the county commissioners and township trustees more say, transparency, more public outreach with regard to that. You still have your rights of intervention to be part of a particular case you've had since 1963. What people don't understand is this. SB 52 starts with utility scale projects, 50 megawatts or above. It does not touch this type of technology in the middle.
Are the majority of these solar farms, are they in the country or are they in residential communities?
I would say this, when you're talking about the large utility scale, yes, they're in rural areas because that's where the room and stuff is. When you're talking about things this size, they can be anywhere between 5 and 20 acres. Given the size and scope of the technology, that's anywhere between 10 and 300 acres in size. A lot of people are seeing this because the local distribution for a community scale project is not the interstate transmission grid. It is a local circuit and a locally utility controlled distribution circuit. You're going to have to find circuits that have less population, less customers per line of mile, more megawatt capacity. That sounds like those circuits in rural areas. That's where they're taking a look at. Okay?
Most of the country.
Yes, very good question.
Then I had a question.
Yes, sir.
The OTA document, Brochus and Griggs created that.
Yes.
And I distributed that before. I'd also sent you a proposed addition for zoning on the solar. Before it was said our zoning covers it, then no, it doesn't.
Can I see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, I said that. I'm gonna tell you this. I'm not an attorney, which means I would refer you to your county prosecuting attorney. Please tell him I said hi.
Okay.
It's interesting, you're really gonna have to watch your terminology. You do have zoning in place, which is great. Things to think about when you're talking about this, take a look at the scorecard because those are the terms you want to use. If you want to talk about utility scale solar projects, 50 megawatts or above, you can reference those, but also please remember this. You have no authority with regard to that. That's what the power siting goal. On site, you do have some things which complement that interconnection agreement with the local public utility. Setbacks, building inspection, decommissioning, aesthetics are all things you can add with regard to that. And that's a wonderful, worthwhile discussion to take a look at. The word is on site. Community is the middle because here you just have small. And the way I'm reading this, literally you're trying to apply everything in small that could be on-site or community, which means you're going to have to really take a look at and better identify through your terms exactly what type of technology you're looking at. Okay? Thank you for that.
So that the skeleton is really what the OTA put out with Brochus and Griggs, and as you indicated to me, you could assist us in putting that meat on the bones, working with us, and kind of what we want to do.
Yes, please remember I'm not an attorney, but I work
Correct.
very closely with the county prosecutor or anyone that you retain with regard to this. I've done a number of meetings with local township trustee associations at the county level and local zoning appeals boards because they're looking for this type of language. I'm not an attorney, but I can make available to you as a matter of public record sources of material. The stuff from the Power Siting Board and JCAR I've sent them to, and I tell you, the folks basically in one county said after 48 hours, this is what we were looking for. Dale, we can read this, we can understand it. We say we're going to copy it all verbatim? The answer is no, because we have some unique needs to our community, which is rightfully so. Etna has unique needs do you want to address. But here's some verbiage, here's some examples. Here's some material where you can find, Mr. Evans, that meat for the bone. You can take a look at that, adapt, work with your resources, work with your community, work with your county prosecutor to incorporate that into the language that you see fit for Etna Township.
And then one thing, would you agree that it's important to get that implemented, what your wishes are as soon as possible? Because once someone puts, I think you gave me your, yeah, once somebody puts in an application before that's in place, they're grandfathered in. There's nothing we can do. So if we delay this, it gives others the opportunity to
Yes.
kind of just go through without any regulation.
That's correct, and you have to watch grandfathering, because I tell you, there is a court case right now in Champaign County for a project this size that was established last year. Their point of interconnection is with the transmission circuit and not the local distribution circuit. That's the only difference between the two, but the size and scope is very, very similar. Their township trustee said, well, you know, we're already talking about this with House Bill 450. House Bill 501 was not enacted yet. They basically said, we don't want to do this. We voted it down and rejected it. They went to court. This is what the law said. They were grandfathered in. They took it to appeals. And you need to read the decision with regard to that, which was posted Thursday last week. They're grandfathered in. Those are some things you want to take a look at. And it's amazing the number of your counterparts in a number of communities across the state who are rapidly coming up to speed to help address some of those issues. Okay. But Mr. Evans, you bring a very valid point.
And I'd just like everybody to know too, Mr. Arnold did, you produced a video a couple years ago, about an hour and a half long. If anybody wants the link, I can provide it. I think I provided it on my website before.
Yes. As I said, I've been with Mid-Ohio Regional Planning for a number of years. I represent farmers and rural residents and local governments in that particular area. And the year COVID started 3 years ago, we decided to do workshops. And I and Matthew Butler, who is Director of Regulatory on these issues with the Power Siting Board, and a wonderful resource for you basically to call, we did a virtual workshop program, 1 out of 4 days with regard to that. We were on day 1, and that's the recording you've seen. It's amazing the number of people who are still watching it, so it's still very much up to date. But good, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is there any other questions?
I have one.
Oh, yes ma'am.
So I know there's so many resources out there. Just off the top of your head, do you have your top 5 like newsletters that we can sign up to keep in the loop?
I would say this, what you want to do is you want to contact your county farm bureau. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do this. Send me an email and I will forward that to them. My email is DARNOLD, darn old. They are DARNOLD at OFBF, that stands for Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, OFBF.org. Send that to me, say that we met here, and I'll refer that basically to your county farm bureau, and they can help you with regard to that.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So the passing of the exclusionary zone would just pertain to the utility level, 50 megawatts and up, right?
That is correct. The exclusion zones that you were able to do through your county government, which starts as a resolution here, goes to the county basically for a full resolution there. Only your county commissioners have that ability under SB 52, and only utility scale solar projects come under SB 52 provisions. Okay.
No, I did have one final thing. You had mentioned a couple things about concerns about decommissioning and all that. Noise was one. What is your experience or that with noise? I've seen some videos where it seemed like there was quite a bit of buzzing near residential there.
Well, what's interesting is this, because under utility scale guidelines for both wind and solar, you have to do a full ambient noise study in the service area where it's located, which means this, and it's fascinating to watch it, is that there's a company that does that as a subcontractor, and they actually put microphones out through the township, and they actually take an ambient noise reading of what noise is out there and measure it in decibels. When you bring a renewable generation facility in, it cannot impact the ambient noise level in that township by, I think, 1.5 decibels, which is less than the sound of a refrigerator. But there's a science and there's a process involved to be able to do that. And that's one of the things that you as local township trustees might want to entertain, might want to take a look at. I'm working with a lot of your township trustees in other areas. I'm saying, Dale, you know, if we put our material together and we forget something and it falls through the cracks, what do? not much, you've grandfathered them in to take a look at that. As they say, you're not going to be working the same as FERC, NERC, and PJM, but there are a number of things in power siting, economic, environmental, aesthetic, social economic, wildlife, those things on water conservation, which come under your responsibility in power siting. Welcome basically to energy development in the 21st century. I look forward to working with you. I look forward to working with your community through Farm Bureau. And if you need anything else, you know where to get a hold of me.
One final
Sure.
thing. On our conversation on the phone, you mentioned about solar coming in, but then them also adding in other either batteries or
Yes.
site stuff that
Other
is of
things
a
you want to
concern.
take a look at, because remember this, energy development is more than just one technology. We're looking at solar right now, and what you learn working with solar today is going to help you when you see other energy development projects come to Etna Township in less than a decade. I'm working with folks that started basically with solar, who are now taking a look at energy storage systems, like Flint Solar, which is on a 50-acre plot over close to New Albany. Those also have to be cited with regard to that. And another thing too, you're going to be able to find out too, you're hearing a lot about hydrogen production. Hydrogen taking over methane is a number of things as a gaseous fuel. How do you make it? It can be pink hydrogen, which uses nuclear generation for electrolysis. It could be blue hydrogen, which uses natural gas, or it can be green hydrogen, which uses renewable sources. And so could you have, in years, a generation facility, an energy storage facility, an electrolysis facility delivering hydrogen fuel into a pipeline? You need to take a look at that now. You need to ask those pressing questions. You need to have a number of things, everything from power siting to taxation and benefits to community in place. A number of things you want to ask going forward and make sure that don't fall through the cracks. Yes, sir.
I think many residents would benefit, would definitely engage you more, because I know they got a lot to cover tonight in a community meeting.
Yes, sir.
How would they be able to schedule that with you?
I would say this, because we've already talked about it with Mr. Evans, and the only thing you really need to do is contact the County Farm Bureau. And you can send me an email, and I'll send you the information to the County Farm Bureau and the organization director, and say that you're requesting a community meeting in Etna Township, or the Township Trustees can do it on your behalf, and I can do those briefings here. That's how the process starts. Yes, sir.
People have no idea what the ratio of, they have no idea how big a megawatt is when it comes to land use. It's my understanding that...
That's correct, because I'll tell you this, they talk to you about megawatts. We're going to do a couple of megawatts. One thing I want you to think about with regard to the technology, remember when you were in junior high science and we were fiddling around with batteries? And there were two ways you could put batteries together to get an electric charge. Batteries basically that were wired parallel, which is all the positives, all the negatives at the bottom and that. And then there were also batteries put in series, positive, negative, negative. When you wire them in series, you get a larger charge at the end. Believe it or not, solar panels basically are done the same way. And the more solar panels you have stacked in that wiring system, the larger the charge or the larger the megawatt capacity. Which means this, you need more for 1 megawatt of solar, but when you get up basically to 10, 15, 20, 30, you're saying, well, wait a minute, we don't need as many acres with regard to that. Why? Because you've wired them into series and they're delivering generation into series along that particular way. That's the easiest way for me to explain
So
that.
under current technology, how many acres would it take to produce large utility scale solar versus starting with community level solar and then those dividing lines?
I can tell you this, when you're talking about community scale solar, if you are in urban or suburban area, the largest you can do is 10 megawatts. The largest you can do in a rural area is 20 megawatts. Between 10 and 20 megawatts, you're talking between 150 and 300 acres in size. That gives you some idea of the size and scope you're looking at. And those are small compared to some of the utility scale projects you're seeing in other parts of the state and other parts of the United States. Okay. I hope I helped you there.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
No, you answered my questions.
I thank you very much for your
Appreciate it.
time. I do want to wish you well. If you have anything else, I look forward to working with you in the future because I see you have a jam-packed agenda and I want to lead you to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to say, I think we should move forward with this in an expedited manner because we've been caught off guard with things such as other fueling, sheets with semi-fueling, the residential hotel on the 310 property where we had to scramble to get that use code out. So again, to kind of guide our future the way we should be and be proactive, I think we should move forward on this and, you know, engage the Farm Bureau in that skeleton that was provided by the OTA that I've been trying to get this board to address for a while now. So we shouldn't be caught off guard. And the more we delay, the more I think it hurts the township.